guys, it's Jessica from Peace Love Books, and today I'm here with a video chatting about my favorite romances from every month this year. I am not ready to do my top reads of 2023 because I still have like 6 days left of reading, and I could read a new favorite in those 6 days. So I do have my favorites of each month though, because I have been keeping track of this every month since January. I have a template for Instagram, and I went all the way up to I think October, so I was only 2 months behind, and I remember the past few reading months very well, but some of these were surprising. Some of these I forgot about. Some of them are not on my top of the year, but they were the top of that month. There were some months that were really bad reading months for me. I think I had like maybe one 5-star read that entire month, and it's not necessarily like an all-time favorite. It was just like a really good book for that month, and that ended up being the top of the month. So I will go ahead and get to these. They're a little bit of a walk down memory lane because I'm like, oh my god, I read that this year. I thought I read it last year. So I will go ahead and get to them. My January favorite book was Little Lies by Helena Hunting. If you guys have been following me at all this year, you know how I became just utterly obsessed with this book. The audiobook is amazing. It's very angsty. I love Helena Hunting's books under H. Hunting because they're so angsty. I read the 3 books that released in the series this year. Oh my god, I forgot about that. So I technically should have put this on my favorite series of the year list because all of them were so good, and this one is a hate to love. They kind of had a thing in the past, and then now like he did something to really hurt her. Now they're in college and he's a hockey player, and they are having feelings for one another, and it was really good. I need to reread this. The plot's definitely a little fuzzy for me, but I do remember like vividly a couple scenes here and there and how angsty this was. I was obsessed. I loved this. It was definitely a surprise. It was so good. The beginning of the year was basically me loving all my angsty romances, and I need to get back to that in 2024 because the end of the year I didn't read enough angsty romances, and I felt like I was not getting new favorites. But in February, I read The Choice by Ashley Jade, and this book is a love triangle, and it is so good. It is best friend's girlfriend. So it's basically, it's kind of brothers. They're foster brothers, so they're really, really close, and they both have been through like really bad things. And it just so happens that his friend meets her first, and they have very similar trauma that they really connect over, and then they start dating. And the hero is like, oh, but I like met her and I really like her, but she'd already met his friend. So they started dating, and he's like kind of on the outside like, oh, but I really, really like this girl. And he gets close to her, and it's obvious who the relationship's supposed to be with. And we see them though in The Words, which was one of my favorite books of last year. And you know that they have a lot going on, because I think she ends up being the kind of manager PR person for the band, and he and his best friend are in the band, and one of them, something happens to them in The Words, but I don't want to spoil. But this one is basically how they get to that point. So this is basically a prequel, because then we're gonna see how he and her get together like as adults versus when they're teenagers falling in love. And this was so good and so angsty, and I was obsessed. It was so good. So obviously it was a favorite of mine. Then I honestly thought I read this last year. I had no idea that this was a book I read this year, and that is Next to You by Hannah Bottom Young. This feels like literally like another time in my life. This is a really adorable friends to lovers romance. It might be, did I not read her until this year? I must have read a different book by her last year because I don't remember. I read one of her Sapphic. I read the Sapphic Christmas Novella last year, but I remember reading this before book 1, and so I read book 1 this year. I don't know. I've read all of her books this year. This one is a friends to lovers romance, and he is so smitten with her, and I was obsessed with him, and their dynamic was just so precious and cute. And she has kind of like a midlife crisis, not even midlife though. She just has like a mental crisis breakdown on her birthday and buys a bus, and she's like, I gotta renovate this bus. He helps her with it, and he has really liked her since they became friends, and she kind of friend zoned him. So he's felt like in the friend zone, but she's really liked him, and it's very adorable. Friends to lovers, like supremacy is this book, and I was obsessed. I didn't love the next one in the series, the one I read after this, which is actually book 1. I didn't love that one. I think I gave it like 4 stars, but this one, so stinking cute. So good. Then we have April, which is another angsty romance, and this one I don't know will be on my favorites of the year, but I really, really like this, and it is Blame It on the Tequila by Fiona Cole. This one is a stepbrother romance where they got together as teenagers, as step siblings, and then they went their separate ways, and now they're adults, and she is reunited with him, and he's in a band. So I typically don't love rockstar romances, but sometimes when they're really, really angsty, I'm obsessed. So there's another rockstar romance actually on this list, and the choice is like a spinoff of a rockstar romance. So like, look at me actually liking rockstar romances. This one, she ends up having to go on tour with them, and she had helped write songs when they were younger. So this one's really good. I think she is like social media famous, and that's why she doesn't get to go with them. But this one was very angsty as well. I remember loving it. We read the whole series for a read along, and this was my favorite of the series. I was obsessed. In June, I also forgot about this one. So this one I also don't think will be on my top 10 of the year, but I still really enjoyed it. It was a really solid small town romance, and it's my favorite of the series, and like the rest of the series just does not live up to this book, and that is One Touch by Lena Hendricks. This one is, like I said, small town. It's book 2 in the series, and they are renovating a house together. So she's kind of like lost in what she wants to do with her life. So she is moving, I think she moves in with her grandma or aunt or some relative, and they want to renovate their house. So she's like, great, I'll take like charge of it. And she starts like documenting it on social media, gaining a following, and the hero is the one helping renovate it because they have to follow certain codes for, I think, historical reasons, but they have to renovate this house together. Very forced proximity. So good. I love the tension between them, and it's kind of hate to love. She doesn't want anything to do with him. It's brother's best friend. So good. This one is for sure a favorite of the year. Like I just remember literally I did not stop talking about this one. If you remember, I read this in July for the Ravished by Romance book club that I run with Lacey. We read Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This is her debut published book. She actually writes fan fiction that I need to go back and read. But this one is a second chance romance, so angsty. It has wedding planning involved. She's a wedding planner. He's a florist for weddings. They meet when I think they're like early 20s when they meet, very fresh in their careers, and have a fling, and then something happens and they haven't spoken since. And now it's years later, and they're reunited at a wedding for a wedding. Like they're planning a really high-end client, and it's like one of her big jobs as an independent wedding planner, and they like request him, and she's like, oh crap, like I have to work with him, and she's like freaking out. Oh my gosh, she is so brooding and angsty and so in love with her and so not over her, and it flashes between the past and the present, so you get to see as they're falling back in love why they fell out of love in the first place, and it was so good, and I totally believe the reasoning. Sometimes I hate it when they leave that kind of reveal to the end, but this one, I loved it. And also, Teddy Hamilton's the narrator, and the audiobook was so good. I remember vividly where I was when I was listening to this book in the car, like where I was going and like the scenery around me, because it was just like so vivid in my mind. Oh my god, it was so good. So good. One of my favorites. Oh, I skipped it. I skipped May. Okay, we're gonna go back to May. Nobody told me I skipped May. I was like, I haven't talked about this yet. I have Fourth Wing Down. I've actually read this twice this year. This one is really good. I loved it a second time around too. The romance is so good. Book 2, I gave 3.5 stars to. I didn't love it, but this one was like absolute 5-star read. So unique, so fun, so action-packed. The plot was so fast. The romance was just to die for. So good. And I was obsessed. With everybody else, I was obsessed. Favorite of the year. This was my favorite of May that I skipped. Jumping back forward to August, my favorite was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This one I loved. I love Ashley Poston. I will read anything she writes now. They all have this fantastical element to them. So this one is the hero meets the heroine in her aunt's apartment, grandma's apartment. I don't remember who it was. Her aunt had passed away and left her the apartment, and she goes there and she sees that this guy is staying in it, and she's like, what the heck? He is actually from 7 years in the past. There's this like time slip in the apartment that you can see people from the past. So it's a time when her grandma had sublet her apartment to this guy, and they meet and they start falling in love, and she then meets him in the real world today. He knows everything that's played out in the past because it happened 7 years ago for him, but it's currently happening for her. It's so good. And he's a chef. And it was so good. So good. Pick this up if you haven't yet. September is my only book I don't own physically, and it is Manacled. I would die to get my hands on a physical copy of this. You cannot buy it anywhere legally because it is fan fiction. I read Manacled and I was like broken for 2 months after this. Like anything I read was fine. Like nothing lived up to the experience of reading Manacled. I have seen it on a few people's favorites of the year list already that I've been watching. This will for sure be on my favorites of the year video because this was a life-changing experience. I sobbed reading this book. I can probably count on one hand the amount of books that have made me sob. One of them is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, but this one, I literally the next morning started crying seeing a TikTok about this book. Like, it is Hermione fanfiction, and I will say I am someone who grew up on Harry Potter, so I know all the characters, I know all the plot, I know the world, and so seeing the characters in this book hit me so much harder because I had that connection to them anyways. And I will say this is fan fiction, so you can't make any money off of it, so J.K. Rowling does not make any money off of fan fiction. I've had a lot of people ask me about that on Instagram. I want to make it clear, fan fiction, nobody makes money off of it. It's illegal. It is not their intellectual property, but J.K. Rowling doesn't own the books either, so no one makes money. You can read this for free on Archive of Our Own online. So this one is in the Harry Potter world after the 7th book, after the Order has lost the War to Voldemort. So Hermione is captured and she is put in this breeding program that's basically like Handmaid's Tale. She is placed with Draco's family, and Draco is the head of the household, and she has to have a baby with him. That is the whole program, is people are taken to be placed into high-profile wizarding houses to help procreate. So she is placed with Draco's family, and it's Hermione fanfiction, so it is Draco and Hermione who fall in love. This book, I was worried would not have an HEA. I will say there is technically an HEA at the end of this book, but it is absolutely heart-wrenching. Oh my god. The last page, I literally lost it. I have a vlog reading this book if you want to watch. I'm so happy I vlogged the experience. I need to read more fan fiction. I know, it's just, they're so long. I read this book, it's over 1,000 pages. I read it in 2 days. I was obsessed, and I will never be the same. Read this if you haven't yet. Then in October, so October was a month where I was like in that kind of slump where I don't necessarily think this is an absolute favorite of the year, but it was a favorite of the month because I didn't really read anything else that I really loved. But King of Greed by Anna Huang came out, and this one is a marriage in crisis romance where they actually do get divorced. So this one is between a couple who we see them fall in love. We get some flashbacks of them falling in love in college, and now Dom is obsessed with money and making a living and being able to support his family. And so he's to the point though where the heroine is like, you don't pay attention to me, you don't love me, and I'm over it. So she leaves, and it's him winning her back and reevaluating his life. I love this one. I flew through it. It was so good. 5 stars. I love a marriage in crisis romance, a second chance romance. So this one was really good. November was a surprise. This was a small town romance out there, but the angst in this book killed me. After the Storm by Laura Pavlov. I'm obsessed with Laura. She is my most read author this year. I read 8 of her books this year. 2, I think, complete series I've read. I just haven't read one of them in this book series. I've read more than 8. I read like her whole Honey Mountain series. Maybe I only read 4 in that series and 4 in this series. So that's 8. This book is a second chance romance. They fell in love when they were younger. It was like right person, wrong time. They just could not make it work, so they broke up. She like immediately jumped into a new relationship, got married, and he was like, fine, I'll go date someone, and got pregnant. So then he ends up being a single dad, and she comes back because her dad needs help, and she is a hotshot lawyer in New York. She's getting divorced from her husband, and she's back in town, and the hero's like, I gotta see her. So he immediately sees her, they talk, and she is hanging out with them and getting to know his daughter, and it's so angsty because she has a life she needs to get back to, but she's falling in love with a small town life with her ex and a future she could have had, and it is just everything. So angsty. I knew from the beginning this was going to be a new favorite of mine, and it just got better, and it was so good. Amazing. 5 stars. And the last one is a series I've not shut up about in December, and this took me by surprise, but it is Poison Roses by Tate James and Jamin Eve. This is a Why Choose rock star romance. The heroine, it's kind of mafia. She gets into trouble in the beginning with an ex and is on the run literally for her life. She witnessed something happen and runs into this guy, and this guy is like, whoa, like, it's fine, like, let me take care of you. And he instantly like falls in love with her. He's like you, I want to protect you and save you. And then he so happens to be the bandmate of another one of her exes who hates her guts because she broke his heart years ago, and the fact that he named a band after her and wrote all these love songs about her, and all of them are like, wait, you're the girl that like he was obsessed with, and the bandmate's falling for her. Her ex is now kind of like, well, am I over you? And then another bandmate starts falling for her. And it's so good, and there's a lot of suspense and action in here. There's a cliffhanger, so I can't wait to read the next one. I'm obsessed. so good. And those are my favorite books from every month of this year. They are not my top 12 favorites though. You will have to wait until next week for my all-time favorite books of the year, but this was fun to do. This was fun to reminisce and see what I enjoyed from each month. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you read these and what your thoughts were. I would love to hear. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.